With theatrical windows shrinking down massively over the last few years, movies generally have a shorter time to make an impression with audiences. And so it's little surprise that so many great films have tanked commercially. These 10 films right here, each of them largely acclaimed by critics, failed to make a dent with mainstream viewers for a multitude of reasons. It's a damn shame that so few people shelled out to watch them on the big screen, because they all absolutely deserve to do so much better. So with all that said, I am Gareth.
I'm Ewan, and here are awesome movies that didn't deserve to bomb.
The Last Duel. Ridley Scott's historical action drama, The Last Duel, received predominantly positive reviews from critics, with much praise for its cast, especially the great Jodie Comer, and the nuanced means through which it examined its delicate subject matter. Despite a first-rate director and A-list cast though, the film ended up tanking catastrophically at the box office, grossing less than half of initial projections on its opening weekend, and going on to nab a total of $30.6 million, a mere fraction of its hefty $100 million price tag. The Last Duel was a great movie caught in a perfect storm of bad circumstances. Older cinema-goers were still staying away from theatres, and at a time where cinema audiences were largely craving escapist spectacle, a 2.5-hour drama about abuse wasn't going to get many out of the house. On top of that, it released in an extremely crowded slot, hitting screens a week after No Time to Die in the US, the same day as Halloween Kills, and a week before Dune. There's some big hitters right there. In light of the film's poor commercial performance, a frustrated Scott blamed millennials, who, in his words, do not ever want to be taught anything unless you're told it on a cell phone. Yet Ridley was not happy. Unsurprisingly, Scott's comments didn't go down too well, though considering the high quality of the movie and its maddening lack of success, it's easy to sympathize with him, to be honest. The Last Duel was reportedly a solid performer on streaming though, seemingly ensuring it's enjoyed something of a second life at home. Now I want to know, what is your favorite Ridley Scott movie of all time? Is it Alien? Is it something else? Mine's Alien if you didn't guess, but yeah, let me know yours in the comments.
Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Oh hell yeah, here we go. Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World was one of the most hyped films of 2003, being touted as a major awards contender, and indeed it went on to receive 10 Oscar nominations, including for Best Picture. But even with Russell Crowe's post-Gladiator star power, the $150 million budgeted feature grossed an underwhelming $211.6 million worldwide, which is just pure weevil. Really hope the people who've seen the film will get that reference. Anyway, despite the wide acclaim for the film's performances and astonishing technical execution, Master and Commander got lost amid a sea of competition, both direct and indirect. Just weeks either side of its release, it went up against an absolute insane bonanza of films, including The Matrix Revolutions, Elf, Love Actually, Bad Santa, The Haunted Mansion, The Last Samurai, and, of course, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. A frankly ridiculous slate of winter blockbusters. The film's less action-packed nature than the marketing implied may have also harmed its word-of-mouth appeal, I don't know. While the Patrick O'Brian novel series on which the film is based, while really popular and totally dadcore in a way that's totally up my alley, was far from the fantasy and buzzy young adult novels that were well on their way to box office dominance at the time. At the very least, Master and Commander's reputation has endured over the last 2+ decades, and it's likely been a consistently solid performer on home video, especially with its amazing 5.1 surround sound mix.
Ambulance. Michael Bay may have a reputation as one of the most prolific and commercially successful filmmakers working today, but he actually hasn't had a box office hit since 2014. His film Six Underground went direct to Netflix, Transformers: The Last Knight massively underperformed, and 13 Hours: The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi was a straight-up bomb. Yeah, not the best run. Bay's newest project, Ambulance, seemed like a sure thing on paper. A high-concept genre film filled with explosions, high-octane chase sequences, and awesome drone shots. Led by the beloved Jake Gyllenhaal? Oh, what's not to like? Hell, even with Bay's reputation for commanding massive budgets, Ambulance was made for an impressive $40 million. And in a marketplace dominated by CGI-heavy tentpoles, the presence of a more modest, mid-budget action flick honestly seemed refreshing as hell. The irony is that despite being Bay's best-reviewed film in over 25 years, since 1996's The Rock, Ambulance sank like a stone at the box office. It's difficult to nail down a single reason for Ambulance's failure, though there are a few possibles. Bay's declining standing with mainstream audiences, the film's bad title, and perhaps most notably the decline of mid-budget films on the big screen. In a theatrical landscape dominated by $200 million blockbusters, audiences may have taken one look at Ambulance and just decided to wait for streaming. We've all done it, don't lie.
Ferrari. While Michael Mann is one of our greatest living filmmakers, having directed such seminal classics as Thief, Manhunter, The Last of the Mohicans, Heat, and The Insider, like, Jesus Christ, what a run! His most recent efforts have struggled for attention at the box office. Most recently, the 2023 biopic Ferrari, starring Adam Driver as the legendary Italian car designer Enzo Ferrari. Like Black Hat before it, which is also just incredibly underrated, Ferrari failed to strike a chord with audiences, and while that is a huge shame, especially as rumors are saying it's impinging progress on the long-anticipated adaptation of Mann's own novel, Heat 2, at Warner Brothers, and by the way, that's a book you need to go out and read, the most undeserving bomb in the director's catalogue came about 20 years earlier, albeit one that has since developed a strong cult following.
Licorice Pizza. Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza is, true to form for the director, an impeccably crafted piece of work. A deliriously entertaining coming-of-age dramedy, which received 3 Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay. Not too shabby. Despite rave reviews, the film didn't get anywhere close to turning a profit theatrically, ultimately failing to even recoup its $40 million budget. Yet this admittedly isn't exactly something new for Anderson, who in fact has only had 2 of his 9 movies to date turn a profit in cinemas, Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood. In the case of Licorice Pizza, the budget was undoubtedly bloated out by its period setting, which always adds millions onto any film's price tag, ensuring its chances of immediate profitability in the pandemic landscape were always going to be extremely slim. Despite Anderson's poor commercial track record, studios evidently continue to work with him because the prestige and potential for Oscar nominations is definitely worth it. Nightmare Alley. Guillermo del Toro's period psychological thriller Nightmare Alley was one of 2021's most unforgettable genre films, a sumptuously shot and brilliantly acted effort that received 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Nightmare Alley's Oscar recognition is all the more surprising given the film's atrocious box office performance, barely clawing back half its $60 million budget. The reasons for its failure are myriad. Viewers' reluctance to return to cinemas, a vague marketing campaign which didn't sell the movie well, and surely, worst of all, deciding to release it the same day as Spider-Man No Way Home. Right. Look, counter-programming can work, but not against a film as enormously hyped as No Way Home that basically everybody and their grandma wanted to see. You just can't compete with the webhead, folks. As with many other flops on this list, Del Toro's movie performed better on streaming, even if its lavish production values absolutely made it a film well worth catching on the big screen. I did, and I loved it. Now, if you're finding this list right here quite fascinating, then I've got some great news for you. Hit subscribe down below and you will get even more Whatculture videos each and every day.
Miami Vice. A reimagining of the Mann-produced TV show from the 80s, Miami Vice starred Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx in the roles of Crockett and Tubbs, and took those characters into the gritty post-9/11 era of America's war on drugs, featuring an iconic Linkin Park and Jay-Z soundtracked opening, and plenty of cutting-edge digital photography. Despite this, Miami Vice was dismissed at the time as just another modernized take on a classic TV series, and the 2000s did see a lot of those. But Mann's film is truly iterative, combining his drive for authenticity with the soulful, poetic lyricism that made Thief and Heat essential urban odysseys. Again, it's a shame that so much of Mann's work post-Collateral has been broadly dismissed. Public Enemies, Black Hat, and Ferrari are each fascinating and truly brilliant pieces of cinema that deserve another look. But out of all of them, Miami Vice still feels like the most unjustly received.
The Green Knight. Unlike most films on this very list, David Lowery's surreal fantasy epic The Green Knight didn't have a hefty budget to recoup at the box office, having been made for an impressively svelte $15 million. That is relatively cheap in the movie business, baby. Yet despite receiving rave reviews for its writing, direction, performances, and jaw-dropping production quality, the film sadly failed to break out as a larger hit. A24 boldly decided to give The Green Knight a wide theatrical release, dropping it in 2,719 North American cinemas. Yet it only barely made its budget back and ultimately failed to turn a profit on the big screen. Given Lowery's artsy approach to well-trod subject matter that would surely alienate more casual audiences, it is little surprise that the film netted a dismal C+ cinema score and quickly fell off a cliff at the box office. It also didn't help that The Green Knight ended up skipping a major theatrical release in some prominent markets, such as the UK, where it went direct to Amazon Prime the same day it hit select cinemas. All in all, A24 movies tend to perform well on streaming and don't spend as much on marketing as more mainstream fare. So while its performance wasn't an abject disaster like some films on this list, it is still a bit of a disappointment for original, visionary, adult cinema.
Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story is such a savagely hilarious takedown of the musical biopic that it basically scared the genre out of Hollywood for a decade or so. And though it remains a much-loved parody almost 20 years following its premiere, it was a total box office bust on its original release. Even with a fairly modest $35 million budget and the presence of comedy star John C. Reilly, Walk Hard made just $20.6 million worldwide, which was barely half its budget. A big part of the problem is that movies parodying a very specific subject are tough to market to a mainstream audience. And it certainly didn't help that the parody genre was firmly dying by 2007, especially given the number of low-effort, post-scary movie romps that were forced into cinemas throughout the early 2000s. Like, they were radioactively bad. Just anything that went near there, you just knew was gonna be terrible. Simply put, there's a limited audience for a movie making fun of generic musical biopics, and Sony also massively shot themselves in the foot by releasing it just 4 days before Christmas. Let's be real, no one was shaking their turkey-induced food coma to go out and watch Dewey Cox. It just wasn't gonna happen. It just isn't the sort of movie people want to go see around the holidays. Not to ignore the fact that it was competing against the far more commercial likes of I Am Legend, National Treasure Book of Secrets, and Sweeney Todd. And that's a huge shame, because everyone who missed out didn't get to experience the most authentic depiction of the Beatles in movie history. I'm absolutely being serious when I say that.
West Side Story. Bets don't come much surer than Steven Spielberg, who over the last 20 years has produced just 2 box office underperformers, Munich and the BFG, and almost a dozen smash hits. People usually love them some Spielberg. A Spielberg-directed remake of West Side Story, one of the most iconic musicals of all time, must have seemed like a financial slam dunk to 20th Century Studios when the project began filming back in the summer of 2019. But with the pandemic pumping the brakes on adult-skewing movies, and younger audiences having little to no nostalgia for the original 1961 film, West Side Story ultimately failed to turn a profit. With its massive $100 million budget and extensive marketing campaign, it likely needed to gross around $250 million in order to be a success, but ultimately didn't even crack 1/3 of that figure. Yikes. Even with rave reviews and a mighty A cinema score, leading to 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, this was a film that categorically failed to entice general audiences. Though West Side Story has been another strong performer on streaming, it's a shame that arguably Spielberg's best movie in 20 or so years was largely just ignored on the big screen.
The Limey. For as much as he's an amazing filmmaker, Steven Soderbergh has an unfortunate track record with bombing at the box office. Take the recently released Black Bag, for instance. A brilliant espionage throwback to the works of Le Carré and Dayton, and yet one that only just managed to make half its budget back following its premiere. Then there's Logan Lucky, a brilliantly witty crime caper which couldn't even levy the involvement of Channing Tatum, Daniel Craig, and Adam Driver to make waves at the 2017 box office. There was The Informant before that, and Shay Parts 1 and 2 before that. And well, you get the picture. It just blows chunks that one of our most fascinating and talented filmmakers struggles to capture a big audience outside of the Ocean's films and Magic Mike. But the most upsetting bomb of Soderbergh's for me personally, well, that's gotta be 1999's The Limey, Soderbergh's tribute to 60s noir and John Boorman, and also the most beautiful meditation on grief I've ever encountered in a film. Featuring Terence Stamp in one of his finest ever performances, The Limey is most famous for the "Tell him I'm coming" scene. And while there are certainly humorous moments in the film, the memification of that moment belies a deeply meditative and fascinating picture. One that sadly only grossed $3 million against a $10 million budget. So many of Soderbergh's films deserved better when they were in cinemas, but The Limey, which I honestly consider to be his greatest work and a truly cathartic cinematic experience, stands out as the most wronged of all.
The Outfit. The Outfit is a low-key crime drama starring Mark Rylance as a tailor who finds himself caught in a battle of wits with a group of gangsters. The film was largely praised by critics for its smart screenplay, fun plot twists, and great performances, though this sadly failed to translate into box office gravy. Even with the film clearly being made on a relatively low budget, taking place primarily in one location with just a few actors, the low worldwide cume of just $3.6 million just was not enough for it to turn a profit. Between the film targeting older audiences, focus features rather lackluster marketing push, and many viewers now preferring to wait for streaming for lower budget films they perceive as less cinematic, this Rylance starring picture just never really stood a chance, did it?
Warrior. Given the fair reliability of underdog sports dramas at the box office, Warrior seemed like a slam dunk on paper. Or maybe a total knockout, because they don't play basketball in this. It's a movie about punching people. An MMA movie starring Tom Hardy as a fighter who ends up fighting his brother played by Joel Edgerton? What's not to like? This has dad movie written all over it, and if anyone knows dad movies, it's this guy. Now, despite being well received by critics for its unexpectedly emotional drama and strong performances, leading to a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nom for Nick Nolte, Warrior grossed just $23.3 million, falling way shy of its $25 million production budget. Marketing is definitely the big issue here. The trailers focused in on the hyper-masculine combat sports aspect. There it is! Even though large swaths of this 140-minute long film are more dramatic in focus. The movie's lack of real-life inspiration, that is to say, it isn't a sports biopic, also placed a low ceiling on its prospects. And it's fair to say that Tom Hardy was still a rising talent in 2011, far from the A-lister he is today, even if he had made a really cool impression in Inception the year prior. And finally, there's the thunderously generic title, which just gives the impression that this is a totally by-the-numbers sports movie, which couldn't be much further from the truth. I'm willing to bet a lot of you haven't actually watched this one, so why don't you give it a chance this week?
The Northman. No matter how warmly received the film was by critics, and that it scored a surprisingly not bad B cinema score despite its surreal nature, The Northman was always going to face an uphill struggle theatrically. With a stonking $70 million budget, or if some sources can be believed, $90 million budget, The Northman would need to cross $150 million to get anywhere close to profitability, which even with pop culture's current obsession with Vikings, it had zero chance of doing. The director's most recent project, Nosferatu, certainly proved that folks are willing to turn up to catch a big-budget Eggers-directed film. However, The Northman, as brilliant as the movie definitely is, just didn't catch on with the mainstream in a similar way in the end. The Night House. Despite rave reviews for Rebecca Hall's superb, awards-worthy performance, and David Bruckner's tense, restrained direction, horror movie The Night House failed to become a wider word-of-mouth hit, as Searchlight Pictures clearly hoped, finishing at a paltry $15.5 million worldwide. Now, even though the film's undisclosed budget wasn't massive, it clearly wasn't exactly super low either, and so there is no chance it turned a profit theatrically. It didn't help that the trailers largely sold the film as a more conventional horror flick, when it was in fact a quiet, restrained, weird type of genre offering, as surely led to it receiving a dire C- cinema score from audiences who probably felt deceived. You lied to me, so here's a negative review. This likely killed its word of mouth and ensured that a lot of potential customers ultimately waited to watch it on streaming instead.